Hello and welcome back to the channel. The original Ghost in the Shell film was released in 1995. 25 years later, its themes around cybernetics, artificial intelligence, the influence of technology on the nature of humanity and individuality are, if anything, increasingly relevant to the future we all face. Its key question, tying into the name of the film itself, is a person's spirit, their ghost, their soul, something that endures across boundaries physical and metaphysical. It has long been regarded as not just a classic anime, but a classic piece of science fiction cinema. And so, when it was announced that a live action version was being made, the project attracted a lot of attention, not least for the fact that it was coming from an American studio, and so was to be a Western translation. To this point, the track record in the quality of American live actions of popular anime was questionable, to say the least. Dragon Ball Evolution, Death Note, The Guyver, Fist of the North Star had all been failures to varying degrees in varying ways. So, would the ghost of Ghost in the Shell survive through to the new version? Even before filming, the new film attracted controversy over the choice to cast Scarlett Johansson in the central role. That choice put the film centre stage in a conversation about whitewashing in Western cinema, as a petition was started asking for the role to be recast. Things were inflamed by a report that claimed effects work tests had been done to alter Johansson's appearance in post-production. Paramount would go on to release a statement to clarify that a test had been carried out on a background character, not Johansson, and it was something which was ultimately not used in the final film. It is certainly true that Hollywood has an uncomfortable relationship with characters from Asian backgrounds. Thankfully, things have moved on from the days where Mickey Rooney's performance in Breakfast at Tiffany's are seen as acceptable, but there is certainly still underrepresentation of Asian characters and cases of questionable casting, such as Emma Stone's casting as a half Asian background character in 2015's Aloha. Director Rupert Sanders has said that he stands by the casting of Johansson, who he called the person I felt most embodied the physicality and the ability to inhabit the role. The casting was seen as less of an issue in Japan, with Mamoru Oshii, the director of the original, saying that he had no real issue with the casting because the character is a cyborg. He said, "What issue could there possibly be with casting her? The Major is a cyborg and her physical form is an entirely assumed one. The name Motoko and her current body are not her original name and body, so there is no basis for saying that an Asian actress must portray her." And the 2017 film does indeed engage with the idea, albeit not altogether successfully, that the Major is in a body that has a different ethnicity to her original body. Johansson's casting undoubtedly is to some extent connected to the attempt to attract a Western audience to the film who would largely be unaware of the source material. I do believe she puts in a pretty strong performance, more on that in a bit, but it would have been a positive step forward if an Asian actress had been cast to portray a character of Asian origin in a big budget Hollywood production. In a way, the controversy is almost an analogy for the film itself, for the idea of something having its identity changed and tweaked with the hope that its spirit would continue to run through, but with that change actually altering that spirit. Upon its release, the film was met with mixed reviews that leaned towards the negative, and it took $40 million during its domestic release in the US against a budget of $110 million. So, safe to say the film didn't perform as hoped. But whilst the film certainly does have flaws, I do think there are a number of things in it that can be appreciated. So let's discuss those elements before having a think about why the film as a whole doesn't quite work. First up, and probably the most immediately apparent element that is praiseworthy, is the overall production design. We're presented with a cyberpunk near future city that feels consistent from its slums, to its glossy high-rises. New life breathed into the legacy of Blade Runner's imagined city of the future. Cybernetic enhancements are startlingly realised on a number of characters, and the full cybernetic body of the central character is presented as part mechanical, part biological, in a fantastic real-life interpretation of the source material. The futuristic feel of the film is enhanced by the use of a neon, often high-contrast colour palette throughout. At times it feels like a film noir that has stumbled into a paint vat. A film neon, if you will. Interestingly, Blade Runner 2049 came out the same year. Both films' aesthetics are striking, offering subtly different versions of a similar concept, with Ghost in the Shell leaning towards a slightly more artificial feel that feeds into the underlying questioning of life as an artificial construct. As I mentioned, I do think Johansson puts in a good overall performance as the Major. It's her physicality that stands out, the way she moves. Whilst in combat she is nimble and quick, but this is contrasted elsewhere as Johansson gives the Major a stillness that implies her manufactured body. When she walks, she puts a weight into her stiff stride, she stands straight with shoulders wide, and for example in one moment she stands over another character leaning at an uncomfortable angle with an almost Pinocchio-like air. She stands not far from a foot shorter than co-star Pilou Asbæk, but you fully believe she could throw him over her shoulder with ease if she chose to. However, having said that, the scene in which she is weakest, in which the choice to play the Major so understated in movement and emotion, is unfortunately one that is critical to the film succeeding. As the Major learns about her past and meets the woman that she realises is her real mother, the emotional weight of the scene doesn't land. And so one of the film's biggest twists fails to have the impact it needs to bring home its theme. This is the moment where the film is really looking to question what a soul is, or a ghost in the film's terms. But we don't get the impression that Major was the person she is beginning to remember that she was. It's hard to describe it exactly, but it feels like a twist for the sake of a twist, rather than something that feels consistent with the story so far and that has been emotionally earned. The Major is a hard role to play, requiring a strong physical performance alongside the emotional. Johansson comes close to nailing it, but appears to have focused perhaps a shade too much on the physical side, so that in the key emotional moments she comes across as cold, so important beats in the story don't quite land as they need to. Of the rest of the cast, only really Asbæk is given much to do, as he acts as Major's partner in the special ops team that they are members of, providing a sardonic presence who the Major can bounce off to show a little humour at times. Although their conversations about to what extent memories make a person feels somewhat contrived, with one, for example, coming up out of nowhere as they drive to a location. Beat Takashi and Juliette Binoche both appear in what almost amount to cameo roles, in what feels very much like wasted opportunity. Their few scenes suggest fatherly and motherly connections with Major respectively. There is an interesting angle about a new family that has come together for the Major that is wasted. Again, a key moment in the later part of the film is robbed of its emotional impact due to this. No one else is given enough to be memorable. You simply forget about the other members of the team after the opening scenes as they just disappear from the narrative. And even the film's ultimate villain is a character that struggles not to be lost amongst the shuffle as the plot develops. It's a plot that takes the core concept of the original, picks and chooses a few select elements and scenes to recreate, but otherwise largely goes in its own direction. Here, ultimately, the core of the story is about a corporation being morally dubious in pursuing its agendas in the style of RoboCop's OCP. rather than the original film's focus on a self-aware computer program, gaining not only sentience but also seemingly a soul. The framework of the story is fine, but it's the Major's character arc here that pulls the film down. Hers is the key arc of the story as she slowly discovers a conspiracy to cover up her true origins. This is where the film misses the mark. By setting up essentially an AI that finds sentience and a lead that can effectively transfer their consciousness into other bodies and link with other minds, the original film sets up plenty of questions and discussions about what it actually means to be human, to be a person. On the other hand, the 2017 version goes for a simpler take on the subject matter, with Major questioning her identity, knowing that at any time her mind can be wiped and reset, and with only a few years of memories to call on. The philosophical elements of the story are less intriguing with this setup, and little is made of the ability of Major and those like her to leave their bodies and essentially exist as data in a network. Indeed, one of the film's antagonists displays this trait and does eventually leave behind his physical body, but yet again it's another moment in the film that is wasted, another moment that is lost, to quote a cyberpunk legend, like a tear in the rain. It's these missed opportunities that mean the film never fully coalesces into something more than a spectacular looking but routine feeling thriller. Its central mystery is not developed smoothly enough to fully engage and drive the film, whilst the film's approach to the philosophical elements in their simplified form feel at times forced and at other times undercooked. It is certainly fair to say that something was lost in the translation from anime adaptation of a manga to a live action film aimed at a largely Western audience. I will say it is a film that has grown on me after a few viewings though. The first time I saw it, the weakness of the central themes meant I didn't pick up on a lot of them, and the film felt quite disappointing. Having seen it a few times more, I have a stronger appreciation of what the film is aiming for, but ultimately it doesn't succeed. It's a different animal in the end to the film and manga that it's based on, as it approaches the central themes of the property from a different angle, looking to make them simpler for a large audience to digest. Although I will say that one last mark it does deserve in its favour is it does for the large part avoid the sexualization of the Major's body that is so apparent in the anime. Anime of the 90s really did have a very strong male gaze element running through it, but a larger discussion on that we can get to later. Ghost in the Shell's live action remake is a fantastic looking film and an outstanding technical achievement, but it does lack what you would call the ghost of the original. If you can treat it as its own thing, it's well worth a watch if you're looking for something that is visually appealing, but ultimately not a film you'll spend too much time thinking about. And definitely seek out the original anime if you've not seen it before. So that's my thoughts. If you weren't bored, help the ghost of this channel grow by hitting like and subscribe. Do let me know your take on the film if you've seen it in the comments below, and I'll catch you next time.